If you see me, oh, here we are. So we're live right now here on Instagram and on Common Time Online with our weekly Wednesday webinar series called Wisdom Wednesdays. And I've got two cameras here with me. So once again, if you see me doing the do-si-do here, you know that it's because I'm looking at two cameras. First, I want to start off by welcoming you here. It is the holiday season for a lot of people in the world. It's the end of the term for a lot of our fellow educators out there. So I wanted to honor that by wrapping up in a nice, warm sweater, just to celebrate the end of that term and the winter months that are ahead. My name is Michael Skillern, and Common Time is your kind of all-inclusive interdisciplinary home database, kind of headquarters for the arts. Our goals are to engage learners, empower artists, and expand arts outreach through our purpose built, stable, safe, and secure video conferencing platform that allows us to connect educators and artists and arts organizations and individuals through these live engaging virtual sessions that look, if you're looking at Instagram, imagine the Common Time website around here. And if you're looking on commontime.online, this is exactly what these sessions would look like for you. Just to break it down and make it a little bit more clear, we're bringing together all the stakeholders of the arts, not musicians, but artists, educators, arts organizations, and individuals, and we're connecting them with the drama side of that community, the music part of that community, the dance part of that community, and the visual arts section of that community. So, for an educator, for example, you can log into the Common Time platform, sign up as an educator, and look through and find a dance or visual art or even a theater or drama guest artist on our platform that's been vetted by us. You can schedule them, book them, pay them, and host them for yourself, for your organization, or for your classes right here in one place. And that works for all types of arts educators. For artists, by using our platform, we give you a space where you can host content, host live performances and events that are ticketed, and also make yourself available for educators around the world. Ooh, excuse me, let me grab my laptop charger. So, an artist like me that lives in Dubai can have a music teacher in India reach out to me and bring me into their classes for an experience that will undoubtedly be amazing for the students, but also amazing for me. So that's kind of a rundown about what Common Time is. This week, our webinar topic is using guest artists in the general music slash performing arts slash arts classroom. And what I'm trying to get at with that title is we're talking about primary arts learning. That's where you're going to see most of your general music classes are going to take place at the primary level. They could take place at the secondary level as well. In IGCSE, I know they use general music at the secondary level. The U.S. curriculum, for the most part, does not have general music at the secondary level, but could have music appreciation for other things like that. So it's not, I guess, technically directly targeted towards primary teaching, but we're talking about general music teaching, and we're talking about performing arts classes, whether they be drama or dance, and then we're talking about art classes. Looking at the primary level, possibly other levels, depending on what's going on at your school and your situation. We're going to talk about the what, why, and how that using Common Time to bring in a guest artist can help you when you're teaching those classes. So here's the what. Like I said, when I say general music slash performing arts, I'm talking about classroom music classes, music appreciation, music technology, traditional elementary or secondary general music classes. I'm talking about drama, theater, dance, or movement classes that could take place at different levels. And I'm talking about visual art, studio art, 3D art, painting, drawing, those types of classes that you may be teaching, kind of those general arts classes. I'm not talking about more specific music classes, for example, like band or orchestra. We're just talking about those general performing arts classes that you'll see in a lot of schools around the world. So why do we bring in guest artists to these classrooms using the CommonTime platform? You want to give your students access to information beyond their teacher. You want to build up global context in their lessons by giving the students access to different types of musicians, different types of artists, actors, dancers, all from around the world. And you're building that global context by letting your students know that the art that they're studying extends further than the walls of their school building. You want to use guest artists to help your students construct meaning in their learning by adding not only a valuable learning experience, but adding a new face, a new name, and just a new engaging way to approach content to the outcomes that the students are working with. I often say that in these more general arts classes, like your performing arts class, I may do a little dance, a little drama. In your music classes that are going to be doing all types of things, whether it's appreciation, technology, performance, bringing in a guest artist to, I digress. If you look at I'll use the Colorado US standards, for example. If you look at their set of standards, there are, especially at the upper primary level, there are 4 categories of standards, each one of them with 4 like substandards. So there could be potentially 16 standards to go through in a year. And each one of those given standards also has its own qualifiers and different things under there. And it's the same for the other subjects. So when you're teaching these general courses, being able to put faces and names and more engaging learning experiences to those outcomes is essential for making sure your students are learning the way that we all want them to. Bringing in a guest artist gives you a chance to have another vetted educator in your room. A lot of people in cases like these use guest artists to kind of facilitate centers, like centers in an elementary room where they might go over here and then go over here and then go over here. One of the best ways that I've seen CommonTime use in general music or performing arts classes is by facilitating centers where you may have a third of your class over here working on a student-led activity. Then you may have the second third of your class in a section of your room with the CommonTime guest artist. And then you may have the third third of your class with you doing something in that case. So it lets you double the amount of teaching going on in your classroom. Another reason why we need to be using guest artists in these settings is that you can expand your school community beyond your local community, beyond your state, and even beyond your nation. One thing I think is very important and something that doesn't get done enough in arts classes is we're always so quick to let our STEM students especially know that there are engineering jobs and robotics jobs and coding jobs, but we don't give that same opportunity to our arts and performing arts students in schools. Bringing in a guest artist with the CommonTime platform gives you the opportunity to let your students know that we're not just learning the bassoon for fun. This could become your job someday. This is a real life skills. These are real life knowledge and skills that can turn into a trade. And you bringing in guest artists help your students build meaning in their learning through that concept. Educators all over the world use the CommonTime platform to provide virtual field trip experiences that have replaced some of the in-person events and ongoings that have kind of been taken away from us more currently. And CommonTime Guest Artists give you the chance to provide a more meaningful virtual learning experience. These guest artist experiences can go on whether you're in person or at home. And lastly, bringing in a CommonTime artist. Now, we're talking about the why. Why do we need CommonTime artists in your general music, performing arts, or visual arts classrooms? And bringing in these guest artists gives us a great opportunity for differentiation. We can differentiate our learning experiences based on readiness by bringing in a guest artist as a provocation to introduce a new topic or a new unit or a new line of inquiry. I was thinking that so much of our learning we do is sequential, But what that means is that students are most likely ready for the next part of that sequence. That's the purpose of scope and sequence and doing it that way. But differentiation for readiness allows your students to use a different part of their brain, allow your students to learn in a different way. When they're not ready for something, we all know being not ready for something yields different results. And that could be a great learning experience for your students. You can use CommonTime Guest Artists to differentiate your classes for interest. If you are doing a lot of work in your visual art or your performing arts class now based on student interest, use a CommonTime Guest Artist to provoke something new that your students may not know about or be interested in. One really interesting way that I have actually used a CommonTime Guest Artist is out in the UAE. We have a large Indian population. So when you bring in Pranoy, who is a tabla master that's giving sessions right now, he can be booked on commontime.online. When I bring him into my class, half of my classes are engaged in this lesson from a cultural interest. Not to assume that every person of Indian descent likes tabla music, but just that topic in itself is able to grab those students that identify with that cultural tradition in a way that I normally cannot. While for the other students who are outside of that culture, they are met with this curiosity, this newness, this foreignness, this differentness. And I'm able to use my students' interests and cultural connections to differentiate my learning with a guest artist. You can use CommonTime Guest Artists to help you differentiate for learner profile. This is kind of IB lingo right here for all you educators that know that. But if you are building risk taking or chance taking, or in the US, we used to call it character education, but courage, if you're building that in your lessons, bringing in a guest artist outside of your normal discipline, teaching rhythm to a dance class through the lens of a musician, for example, could give your students a new experience that will cause them to be risk takers. Bringing in a guest artist is a new learning experience that most of us are not using in our classes. And CommonTime gives you the opportunity to start doing that and differentiate the type of learning experiences you're offering your students. Are your students experiencing art mainly through pre-recorded or textbook or just physically doing sources? If you're using all of those in rotation, consider bringing in a new type of learning experience like a live engaging virtual session with CommonTime Online. CommonTime helps you differentiate lastly by switching up the content, by giving you a bank of knowledge that goes beyond your country even. Switching up the process by allowing you to bring in a guest artist to change up some of the parts of your process. Oftentimes my own teaching kind of looks like student-led provocation, then some type of introduction and experimentation with our new topic or a unit of inquiry or inquiry in general, then some type of work towards a capstone goal, which could be a performance or a presentation. But I could differentiate that learning process by including a guest artist in my learning. All right, that's the why. That's the why you need to be using guest artists. So let's look at how. How can you specifically use guest artists from our platform to energize your learning that you're doing in your general music, your performing arts, and your visual arts classrooms? This is the how. When talking about this, I'm going to separate each one of our disciplines, dance, drama, art, and music, into three categories: creating art, performing and presenting art, and responding to art. And we're going to go through each discipline and go through each one of those categories and look at how a CommonTime artist can help enrich your classes. So when you're performing and presenting art and you're teaching a general music class, there's always a lot of singing in those classes, a lot of composition. Consider bringing in Joshua Alexander from the United States. It's a personal friend of mine. And he's a vocal coach, choir director, music producer, pianist, and composer. He would be great to come into a general music classroom to help with vocal technique or conversational solfege or using solfege to compose or improvise, helping your students perform and present their music and their voices in a different way with a professional guest artist to teaching artists even from the CommonTime platform. For dance, consider bringing in Pascal Sengel from Germany. He's a professional dancer specializing in kind of like contemporary dance and improvisation and choreography. And he could come into a performing arts class that's focusing on movement and help your students explore different ways for their body to move, different ways for them to engage their bodies, and different ways for them to connect to their performance and to their audiences by movement. If you're teaching a general visual arts class, you could bring in Malathi, who is a Indian German, specializes in watercolors and painting through her own context and lens through where she's from and the part of the world that she resides in. Bringing her into an art classroom to teach her students new methods and techniques and activities for creating art with paint or just color in general. And if you're teaching a performing arts class that has elements of theater in it, consider bringing in Slovakian improv theater specialist Han Chong, who could come into a performing arts class and take your students through improv games aimed at building up their acting chops. If you are looking to use a CommonTime guest artist to create art in your general music or your performing arts classes at the primary level or beyond, consider bringing in Jaskaran, who is a music producer and just a general tech wizard from India, bringing him into your music classrooms to take your students through the creative process in music and how that can connect to using different types of music technology. You can even use some kind of open source music software with your students, like Soundtrap or a Chrome Music Lab or Drumbit, and have a real live music producer come sit with them and talk about making beats or mixing or composing and being creative and translating their ideas from their head or paper to the computer into these digital mediums. In this STEM world, having our students create art with technology is a big weight that's been put on a lot of teachers who may not have had the proper resources to facilitate that. Bring in a guest artist to fill those gaps. If you're creating art in a performing arts class that includes dance elements, consider bringing in Menon from New York City. She is a contemporary and ballet movement specialist, and having her come in and introduce your students to different type of movement and maybe help them turn their explorations of their body into full out pieces of choreography. That's a way that you can facilitate creating art in your performing arts classes with a guest artist on CommonTime. If you are teaching a visual arts class, consider bringing in Ash Pearl from the US to give some of her ideas on color theory and how to mix colors. You know, the old, is it blue plus green or blue and yellow makes green? Having someone like that come in and take your students through some interactive, engaging, insightful activities to get them creating new stuff by using their art skills. And lastly, with drama, if you are teaching creating from a drama standpoint, we've got a great choral and opera director, Jimmy Chang from Vienna, and bringing him into your class, especially with older primary, secondary students, and having him give a workshop on set design and how to interpret text via set and how to use that as an extension of your creative mind would be something that will be really beneficial, not only for your students, but for you as an educator as well. And last but not least, if you are responding to art in your general music, your kind of general performing arts classes, or your visual arts classes, consider an interview series with your musicians where they can bring in our Persian musician, Farzin, and interview him about his culture and the Middle Eastern string instruments like the Comanche and the oud that he plays to help him respond to music of a different culture. Consider bringing in Kanchana, who is a visual artist and architect from Germany, who can come in and take your students through the likes and differences of art and architecture across Europe and India, and allow them to respond to visual art from a different culture in a new and exciting way. And if you're teaching a performing arts class with notes of drama, consider bringing in movie and TV actress Jasmine Akakpo, who's out in LA now, and have her work and give a workshop to your students about how to read and respond to text from the eyes of a director, producer, actress who's getting ready for TV and movies. Having your students, giving them the opportunity to respond to a script through that perspective. That's how we're building real world connections and real world possibilities. Being an actress is a real job. If you are teaching a performing arts class that has dance involved, consider bringing in Hannah Kristoff to help your students respond to storytelling with body movement. That is her specialty, and looking at how stories from different cultures and contexts can change the way you move your bodies. So, as always, this week, Wisdom Wednesday webinar will be available on our blog, as well as right now if you're watching it live. And our topic this week was using guest artists in the general music, the general performing arts, and kind of that general art room that you will oftentimes find in primary situations, but also in secondary as well, if they don't have more specific classes. And I wanted you to take away from this why you need to be using guest artists to facilitate your arts learning, whether you're an individual or an educator or an arts organization working with students of different types, and how I wanted to give you actionable information about how CommonTime and our member vetted, verified professional teaching artists across dance, drama, visual arts, and music can help support creating art, responding to art, and performing and presenting art in your general arts classes. Once again, this is Michael, the Education and Outreach Coordinator here at CommonTime. You can reach me on social media at commontime.online for Instagram, CommonTime Online for Facebook and LinkedIn. You can participate in our interactive Facebook groups, CommonTime for Educators and CommonTime for Artists on Facebook. You could also contact me via email at michael@commontime.online. Be sure to check out our blog where we have these weekly webinar series and also our interview series, CommonTime One-on-One, where we sit down with the people that are moving and shaking in the arts, the composers, the performers, the producers, the directors, the mental health specialists, anyone inside and tangent to our favorite field is going to be there sitting down with me, sharing thoughts, solving the world's problems, and pondering the infinite nature of the stars. Yeah. That wraps up our webinar for this week. To the people who joined us on CommonTime, thank you. And to those on Instagram, good night.